The thing about shame is it doesn't scream, it whispers, slow, soft, and constant. I've learned to live in the quiet of it. The morning Tessa told me, I was folding laundry in the living room. My back ached from the couch that gave more sympathy to dust than to bone. The television was on, but I wasn't watching it. Just the static faces of strangers selling things no one really needs. Tessa stood near the doorway, her arms crossed, her posture too stiff to be casual. "They're very traditional," she said. "Cameron's family." I didn't respond. I knew where it was going. I just hadn't braced for the exact words. "You can't come to dinner next weekend." I looked up. "Why not?" Her lips pressed into a line. She picked at the hem of her designer jacket. "There was particular. I don't want things to be uncomfortable." "For them or for you?" She didn't answer. Then came the line, said so quickly I might have missed it if I hadn't trained my ears to her silences. "You'd embarrass me." That was it. No cruelty in her voice, just truth, served cold and clean. She left soon after, citing errands, appointments, something or another. The door clicked shut like a verdict. I sat back down on the couch, the shirt I'd been folding limp in my lap. Around me, the house exhaled its clutter, stacks of unopened mail, half-finished craft projects, chipped mugs that once held stories, now holding nothing but dust. The phone on the side table hadn't rung in 3 days. I let it sit in silence the way it had learned to. On the walls, pictures of a younger Tessa, laughing, eyes bright, unaware of what was coming. A photo of her 5th birthday frosting on her cheeks. Another from prom in a dress I'd hemmed by hand while Robert complained about the noise of the sewing machine. I stared at that one the longest. She looked so much like me back then. Cameron had never stepped foot in this house, not once. In the 2 years they'd been together, all I knew of him came in filtered stories and curated smiles. Tessa spoke of him in a voice she used when trying to impress. Bright, rehearsed, distant. "He's very driven. He's good with people. His parents have expectations." Expectations I didn't meet. From what I'd seen in photos, stiff family portraits, country club backdrops, Cameron was polished. Navy suits, clean lines, nothing out of place. He looked like the kind of man who gave compliments that could double as critiques. Tessa fit beside him like a painting hung to match the room. When she was little, she used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. She'd ask, "Are monsters real?" I'd tell her, "Only the kind that wear masks." Now she was marrying one with a pressed collar and a firm handshake. I wish I could say I didn't understand where her shame came from, that I was blindsided, but I do understand, because I used to be her. This house, our house, had become a shrine to everything she wanted to leave behind. My unfashionable clothes, my middle-class phone plan, my tendency to overtalk when nervous, the way I still cried at reruns of Little House on the Prairie. Tessa had spent years polishing herself clean of me, and now she was marrying into a family where I didn't belong, not because they said so, but because she believed it first. That night, I wandered the house like a ghost. In the kitchen, the clock had stopped ticking. The light over the stove flickered like it couldn't decide if it belonged. I opened the cabinet and stared at the tea selection like it might offer clarity. Chamomile, peppermint, sleepy time. I chose silence instead. Back in the living room, I picked up a frame that had fallen behind the shelf. It was a photo of me and Tessa at the beach, maybe 10 years ago. She was squinting at the sun, her hair a tangled mess of curls. I was laughing, not posed, just laughing. We looked happy, before Robert left, before I stopped correcting the way he belittled us, before Tessa learned that being palatable was more rewarding than being honest. I pressed the frame back onto the shelf, upright this time. It wasn't about the dinner. Not really. It was about being erased. She didn't want me there because I reminded her of something she's still trying to outrun. And maybe I had let her believe I was something to be outgrown. But I wasn't gone. Not yet. And Cameron? He hadn't met my family, not really, because the one thing Tessa forgot is that I came from something too, and not all of it was silent, not all of it was shame. Before Tessa learned to hide her heart, she used to reach for mine. When she was little, she would climb into my lap without asking, nestling into my chest like she was trying to hear something beneath the silence. I remember thinking it was love. Now I think she was just searching for safety, for space, for something neither of us could name then. Robert made sure she stopped reaching. He wasn't loud about his control. He didn't need to be. His rules were coded into the air. Who spoke first, who stayed quiet, what tone was appropriate, how affection was currency. He never raised his hand. He didn't have to. He weaponized disappointment and made withdrawal feel like punishment. Dinner with him felt like performing on stage. Say the wrong line, and his fork clinked just a little too loud against the plate. Ask the wrong question, and his jaw tightened like a closing gate. Tessa learned the rhythms of that tension by age 6. I watched her become smaller in his presence. Precise, careful. I tried to intervene once. She'd drawn a picture of our family, Robert, me and her, all holding hands. But she'd drawn his figure smaller than mine, her logic simple. "You're taller than Daddy." Robert saw it, laughed once, then looked at me. "Great," he said. "Even your art makes me the afterthought." I tried to explain. "She's 6, Robert." But his eyes were already cold. That night, he slept on the couch. He didn't yell. He just didn't speak to me for 3 days. Tessa picked up on that too. The next drawing had him front and center. I knew better than to argue again. Robert was the kind of man who called you emotional when you cried and crazy when you didn't. Who praised Tessa for her poise, but never her curiosity. Who told her boys wouldn't like a girl who talked too much. Who corrected her posture at dinner parties, but never asked what book she liked. He praised restraint like it was a virtue. And Tessa, she wanted to be worthy of his praise, even when he missed her ballet recitals. Even when he forgot her birthday once and said, "I work hard to keep this house together. You think I have time for cake and candles?" She made excuses for him. "He's just tired. He means well. He doesn't like birthdays anyway." And God help me, I let her. I didn't leave until she was in high school. By then, the emotional scaffolding around her had already hardened. I remember packing the car that morning, Robert at work, Tessa on the porch with her arms crossed. "Are you divorcing him because you don't feel special anymore?" she asked, her voice sharper than her age. I didn't know how to answer, because the truth was, I didn't feel seen anymore, not by him, not even by her. College changed her. Distance calcified what had already begun. She called but rarely. Her tone was clipped, polite. She talked about classes, internships, how certain values didn't resonate with her anymore. She never asked about me, and I understood. I wasn't the mother you showcased. I didn't have the polished career, the polished home, the polished smile. I was the woman who stayed too long and left too late, the one whose voice always trembled a little too easily. Still, I'd send care packages, handwritten notes, old photos I thought she might miss. No response, just a thanks text if anything. She came home less, and when she did, it felt like she was observing me, not visiting. Judging the softness of the couch, the clutter on the counter, the life I'd tried to rebuild. And then came Cameron. Her voice changed when she said his name. She described him like a resume, stable, driven, accomplished. I asked if he made her laugh. She paused. "He appreciates ambition," she said instead. They dated for over a year before she brought him to town. Even then, he didn't come to the house. They stayed at a hotel. She stopped by alone. "She's just not into casual environments," she said, waving at the living room like it was a thrift store. "He's particular." I tried to play along, asked questions, kept my tone light. "What's his family like?" "They're refined. I want to make a good impression." I wanted to ask if I got to make one. I didn't. 2 weeks ago, I ran into her old college roommate, Lana, at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me. "Oh, I didn't realize you were in town." "I live here." I smiled, trying not to sound bitter. She never said. Then she leaned in. "Cameron asked about her family once and she just said, 'It's complicated.' Told him you weren't involved. That he didn't need to meet you." That's when it hit me. Cameron had never asked about me, not once, not my name, not my story, not even a passing mention. He didn't know me because Tessa made sure he never would. She'd erased me from the narrative, rewritten her life without the mother who held her through fevers, stood in doorways during arguments, stayed through silence, and left when the house got too dangerous to breathe in. And I don't think she did it out of cruelty. She did it out of shame. Because when the people who hurt you wear ties and shake hands, and the ones who loved you cry too easily and live in rented homes, shame picks the polished version. But polished isn't proof. And this story, it isn't over. She brought the album like it was a peace offering. A white leather-bound book, pristine and stiff, the kind you only open with clean hands and good posture. She placed it on the coffee table like it didn't belong in my living room, which, truthfully, it didn't. Everything about it screamed polish and money and distance. Cameron's mom made this for us, Tessa said. She's very into presentation. I didn't respond. Just waited as she turned the pages, each one laminated and labeled with gold calligraphy. There they were, Cameron's family. Perfect teeth, straight spines, crisp collars and manicured smiles. Thanksgiving in Aspen, Christmas in Martha's Vineyard, summer on a yacht that probably cost more than my house. Each image captured with surgical precision. No clutter, no awkward limbs, no sweat or shadows. They look happy, I said finally, because it was the safest thing to say. They are, she replied too quickly. We get it, you know? I didn't, not really, but I kept flipping. Cameron was in most of them, posed, calm, always slightly angled as though every shot had been edited with intention. But I noticed something beneath the gloss. In his eyes, a kind of tightness. Not tension exactly, just calculation. He looked present the way an actor looks present in a scene. I paused on one photo, him and Tessa standing by a fireplace. Her smile was wide. His was polite. Something in me clenched. Don't ruin this, she said. I blinked. What? She shook her head, looked away. Just don't ruin this for me. It wasn't a plea. It was a warning. I'm not trying to, I said quietly, but the truth was, I didn't have to ruin anything. The cracks were already there. I just happened to see them. That night, after she left, I opened the album again. I stared at Cameron's expression, searching for something I couldn't quite name. I thought about the way he never visited my home, the way Tessa's tone changed when she talked about him, the way she deferred so quickly to his preferences, his plans, the way she seemed smaller lately. My fingers hovered over the page, then I closed the album and placed it in the drawer beneath the coffee table, next to old cards and forgotten receipts. I made tea, sat on the porch, watched the sky bruise into dusk. The phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. Hello? A pause. Then, Lynn. I froze. Only one person still used that name. Valerie? It's me, my sister, my ghost. I hadn't spoken to her in 8 years. You okay? I asked cautiously. I saw something today, on social media, Tessa and her fiancé. I waited. He looks like Robert. My breath hitched. Not just physically, she continued. The stance, the eyes, the way he holds her elbow. I saw that once at a dinner party when Robert thought no one was watching. I said nothing. You always said I was unstable, she added, but I remember what I saw. I didn't call you unstable, I whispered. Robert did. You didn't correct him. Silence thickened between us. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it, she sighed. I'm sending you something. Look out for it. Val, I think you need to see it. She hung up. I stared at the dead receiver for a long time. The next evening, Tessa invited me to dinner. Not with Cameron's family, just the two of them. Let's keep it simple, she said. No surprises. We met at a boutique restaurant downtown. Soft jazz, exposed brick, waiters who wore cologne that cost more than my shoes. They arrived together, Tessa in a structured dress that didn't look like her, Cameron in another navy suit. He smiled when he saw me, shook my hand like I was a client. Sat down and began talking about his firm's new expansion into real estate. I nodded, sipped water, watched him. Every sentence he spoke was smooth. Every opinion calibrated, every question redirected back to him. Tessa barely spoke. I asked how her new project at work was going. Cameron answered for her. She's still getting the hang of it. She smiled, thinly. Halfway through the meal, I realized something terrifying. She wasn't being ignored. She was being absorbed. After dinner, as we stood by our cars, Cameron leaned in and said, "You've raised a remarkable woman. You must be very proud." It was the way he said it, like it was an achievement he now owned. Tessa hugged me, but it felt rehearsed. I drove home in silence. 2 days later, the envelope arrived. No return address. Just my name in Valerie's handwriting. Inside, a photograph. Old, grainy. A man beside Robert at a fundraiser, hand on a woman's back, too low, too firm. It was Cameron's father. Valerie's note was short. "Ask her what happened the night Robert hosted the Whitmore event. She won't remember, but I do." I folded the letter, stared out the window. They say trauma runs in bloodlines, but so does the strength to end it. I used to believe you could hear danger before you saw it. Raised voices, breaking glass, the unmistakable slam of a door. But some men don't slam doors. Some simply close them softly, one room at a time, until you realize you're locked inside. Cameron didn't raise his voice when I visited their place. It was supposed to be brief. "Just a quick tea, nothing formal," Tessa had said over the phone. Her voice was light, practiced, too cheerful to be real. The house was pristine. Not just clean, curated, white walls, chrome fixtures. Art that didn't invite feeling, only observation. The kind of house you walk through instead of living in. Cameron greeted me with the same smile I'd seen in every photo, the one that didn't reach his eyes. "Tessa tells me you're crafty," he said, leading me toward the sitting room. "Quilts and scrapbooks and that sort of thing?" "I like working with my hands," I replied. "Very traditional," he said, like that was somehow quaint. Tessa appeared behind him, a little too quickly, brushing invisible lint from her blouse. "I made mint tea," she offered, moving toward the kitchen. Cameron cut in. "Didn't we say chamomile today?" "Oh, yes, I forgot." He didn't scold her, just smiled, hand brushing the small of her back in a way that looked tender if you weren't paying attention. But I was. We sat in the sunlight-drenched room with untouched teacups and conversation that felt like choreography. Tessa mentioned a new project she'd proposed at work, her eyes brightening briefly. Cameron chuckled. "She means she emailed an idea to her manager. It's not a project yet." Tessa's smile faltered. "Well, it could be." "Sure," he cut in, "but let's not exaggerate." She nodded, didn't speak again for a while. I watched her shoulders, how they subtly curled inward when he interrupted, how she never quite met my eyes, how she glanced at him before answering any question. "You're quiet," I said at one point. "She's just sensitive," Cameron answered before she could. "It's one of her best and worst traits." I felt the words in my spine, like an echo from a room I'd boarded up long ago. Robert used to say the same thing. "She's sensitive," he'd tell guests when I cried during sad movies. "She takes things too personally." Back then, I thought he was defending me. Later, I realized he was warning them. After tea, Cameron offered a tour of the house. Tessa trailed behind us, smiling too much, touching furniture she didn't need to touch, like she was reminding herself it was real. The guest room was cold and empty. The office was spotless. His office, not hers. He opened a drawer, showing me labeled folders and color-coded tabs. "I like order," he said. "It keeps everyone on track." When we reached the back patio, I noticed the camera above the door. "For security," he said casually. "You never know these days." I nodded, though something in me twisted. Tessa barely spoke the rest of the visit. When I asked if she was happy, she laughed. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" I didn't answer. When I got home, I started writing things down. Not just what I saw, what I felt. How he corrected her with a smile. How she flinched when he moved too fast. How she apologized for forgetting the tea. I wrote it all in a notebook I kept beneath the sink, not because I didn't trust my memory, but because I knew how easily stories get twisted. Especially when women tell them. I reread Valerie's note, the photograph, the man beside Robert, Cameron's father, his hand firm on that woman's back, a woman whose face was turned just enough to make her anonymous. Just enough to be erased. That night, I had a dream. I was back at a dinner party in the old house. Robert beside me, his hand too tight around my wrist under the table. Tessa was 6, watching. She kept mouthing something, "Wake up." When I did, my chest hurt from holding breath I hadn't meant to hold. A few days later, Tessa called, said Cameron's mother wanted to meet me. She thinks it's time we all got to know each other. I said yes. She arrived precisely at 2. Blonde, controlled, smile perfect. "Call me Meredith," she said, pressing a cold-cheeked kiss to mine. Her perfume lingered in the air like judgment. She scanned my living room once and never sat back in the seat again. We talked, or rather, she interviewed. "Do you see Tessa often?" "As often as I'm allowed." "I imagine it's hard, watching your daughter build a different kind of life." "Different isn't bad," I replied. Her smile was tight. "Of course not." We circled pleasantries like wolves in pearls. When she finally stood to leave, she said, "I hope we can find a way to coexist." "Me too," I said. But I knew what she meant. Stay in your lane. Don't ask questions. Don't stir the water. Because Cameron's mask wasn't just his. It was inherited, reinforced, polished, and Tessa was already drowning beneath it. I keep the mirror covered. It hangs in the hallway outside my bedroom, wide, oval, framed in ornate brass. Tessa gave it to me one Christmas, years ago, back when she still bought sentimental gifts. I remember unwrapping it and seeing my own reflection in its surface, warped slightly by the beveled edge. "It's vintage," she had said, "timeless, like you." But it never sat right. I draped a scarf over it soon after, told her it didn't match the decor. Truth was, I couldn't stand seeing myself in it. Not because of age, not because of wrinkles or weight, but because of what looked back. That mirror has become a symbol now, though I didn't realize it at first. Not until recently when I passed it and caught just a sliver of my reflection peeking beneath the fabric, my own eyes looking startled, like I didn't expect to be there. That's how it's always been with Tessa and me. Half-hidden truths, reflections we avoid. I've been thinking a lot about how she learned to see herself, how she learned to measure her value. Robert taught her subtle lessons, lessons no one wrote down but she memorized them anyway. How to speak softly when men talked, how to make herself smaller when someone else needed space, how to smile even when she wanted to disappear. He didn't yell at her, not like he did at me in the early days. With her, he wielded disappointment like a scalpel. She once brought home a C+ on a math quiz in middle school. He looked at the paper, then at her and said, "We don't do mediocrity in this house." She cried quietly in her room. I sat outside her door, listening, not knowing if I should go in. I didn't. That was my mistake, one of many, because as Robert trained her to be desirable, graceful, composed, palatable, I stood by and tried to keep peace instead of making noise. She watched me placate him, watched me compromise, watched me apologize for things I hadn't done just to keep him from retreating into silence or cutting words. And she absorbed that. She learned what a woman should tolerate. She learned what love looked like when it came with conditions, and I let her. But I didn't invent it either. I came from it. My own mother had hands like ice and eyes that never lingered. She made dinners but never conversation. Ironed shirts but never touched a cheek. When I brought home a boy once, at 17, she looked at him for 10 seconds and said, "You'll marry someone better." She meant richer, safer, quieter. Years later, she would adore Robert, called him a man with presence. When he started silencing me with his eyes, she said, "That's how men are." When he forgot our anniversary one year, she sent me flowers on his behalf without telling me. "You don't want him to feel embarrassed," she whispered. It was a lineage of silence, and Tessa was the next in line. When she gave me that mirror, I think she wanted me to see something beautiful in myself. But the tragedy was, she had already stopped seeing it in herself. Or maybe she never had. I pulled the scarf off the mirror yesterday, stared at myself in full, the lines around my eyes, the tightness in my shoulders, the way my mouth sits like it's holding back years of things left unsaid. I looked and I looked until I didn't want to look away. That's when the doorbell rang. A small envelope on the mat, no return address, Valerie's handwriting again. Inside, one photograph. I sat down before unfolding it. The edges were soft, worn by time. The image was black and white, grainy. Two men shaking hands at a gala. One was Robert, the other, Cameron's father. Behind them, a woman stood, looking away from the camera, a bruise just beneath her collarbone, faint, but there. On the back, Valerie had written, "He called it a misunderstanding. Robert vouched for him. The woman disappeared." I stared at that word. Disappeared. I remembered that event, the Whitmore benefit. Robert came home late, smelled like bourbon and something I couldn't place. He didn't talk much that night, said the fundraiser went well. Now I wondered what the price of that success had been. Cameron's father had been Robert's associate for years, construction, zoning, deals no one questioned. Tessa never knew that. I never told her. I thought keeping history quiet would keep her safe from it. But silence is inheritance too. And Cameron? He isn't just a reflection of his father. He's a mirror of mine. When Tessa was younger, she once asked me, "What's the scariest thing in the world?" I'd said, "Losing someone you love." Now I think it's this: watching someone you love become everything you once escaped, and not knowing if you can pull them out before they disappear too. It wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to be there, not officially, not by their design. But when Tessa mentioned a charity function hosted at Cameron's family estate, my mind worked quicker than my mouth. "Oh, the Whitmore Foundation?" I asked, feigning casual surprise. "I volunteered there years ago. Maybe I'll stop by, say hello." Tessa hesitated. "They're particular about guests." "Don't worry," I smiled. "I'll be invisible." And I was, at first. The estate was exactly what I expected. Vast, sterile, curated. A house that didn't hold memories so much as it displayed them in glass. Artifacts of affluence. Cold wood floors that echoed footsteps like accusations. They didn't greet me at the door. A staff member did. Polished and polite. Inside, the foyer glimmered with chandeliers. The smell of lemon oil and something faintly chemical lingered. Dinner was a seated affair. Assigned placements. Mine was at the far end of the table, away from Tessa, flanked by Meredith, Cameron's mother, and a hedge fund executive with a laugh like glass breaking. Conversation flowed like wine, exclusive, expensive, exclusionary. "Oh, you must be Tessa's mother," Meredith said, as though testing the weight of the word mother. We were surprised she hadn't introduced us sooner. "She's protective," I replied. Meredith smiled like a paper cut. "Of course." Cameron's father, Warren, presided over the table like a judge. He didn't smile. He issued commentary. When a young woman across the table mentioned her environmental nonprofit, he barked, "Emotion doesn't solve policy." The room chuckled, nodded, carried on. Tessa laughed too, but it was hollow. Her shoulders were tight, posture too perfect. When she started to comment on her own project, a potential workplace wellness initiative, Cameron cut in. "She means she's drafting ideas. It's not formal yet." I watched Tessa recoil, smile, sip wine, just like I used to. After dinner, the guests dispersed into smaller groups. I slipped into the hallway near the kitchen. Tessa followed, a shadow behind me. "I didn't know you'd really come," she whispered. "You invited me." "No," she said quietly. "You invited yourself." Before I could reply, Cameron appeared. He slid between us like a blade. "Everything all right here?" His voice was too calm. Tessa stiffened. "Fine." He turned to me. "Would you excuse us?" "I think we're all fine where we are," I replied. He smiled. Tight, dangerous. Then, without warning, he reached for Tessa's wrist. It wasn't hard, not bruising, just firm. But she flinched, and I saw red. "Let go of her," I said. His eyes locked onto mine, amused, unmoved. "Sometimes," he said, "you don't realize what's best for someone until they resist it." "She's not resisting, she's surviving." He leaned in slightly, voice low. "No one will believe you. They didn't believe her either." I froze. "What did you say?" He stepped back, smile intact. "You should go." I did, because staying would have meant breaking something I couldn't yet afford to fix. Not without proof, not without preparation. Back in my car, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. He hadn't said Valerie's name, but he didn't have to. And just like that, the past and the present clicked together like teeth. My mother wasn't a cruel woman, just cold. Cold the way a winter draft snakes under your door, persistent, unnoticed until your bones ache. She loved me, I think, in the only way she knew how, through preservation, not connection. She taught me how to make hospital corners on beds, how to fold napkins into swans, how to keep your voice low in a room full of men. She never taught me how to ask questions. "We don't talk about things in this family," she once told me after I asked why my father never came home before midnight. "We survive them." It wasn't an answer, it was doctrine. When I met Daniel, my first love, I thought I'd broken free. He had a laugh that cracked through silence like sunlight. He read poetry out loud and didn't care who heard. He kissed my hand before he kissed my mouth. He asked me to run away with him. Said we could live in a small town with a bookstore and a dog. Said he'd cook and I could write or paint or do anything at all. I said no, not because I didn't love him, but because Robert had already started circling me. Robert made sense to my mother. He had plans, expectations, a name that carried weight. Daniel had dreams. "You'll be taken care of with Robert," she said. "Love comes later." It never did. The early years with Robert weren't violent, just quiet, eroding. He'd correct my opinions mid-sentence. Say I was too emotional if I cried during movies, too dramatic if I got upset about canceled plans. He monitored what I wore, how much I drank, how often I called my sister. If I pushed back, he'd disappear for hours, return with cold eyes and colder silence. I learned to anticipate his moods like weather. I learned to forecast disappointment before it landed. I stopped asking questions. I stopped speaking first. I called it compromise. It was submission. By the time Tessa was born, I had folded myself so many times I wasn't sure what shape I'd originally been. She was quiet, even as a baby. Alert, watchful. She learned to read tension in a room before she could read words. She started whispering when Robert was around by age 5. I thought she was just shy, but I know now she was becoming me. I tried to protect her by being agreeable, by never contradicting Robert in front of her, by playing the peacekeeper. I thought silence would shield her. But silence is not armor, it's a blueprint. She built her foundation with mine. After Robert left, finally and not on his terms, I found myself trying to reclaim a voice I'd long since buried. But it was too late to teach Tessa different. The mold had set. She learned to smile when she was hurting, learned to overachieve to earn affection, learned to align herself with power, not because it made her happy, but because it made her safe. And I let her, because that's what was done to me. The other day, I was digging through the attic when I found an old box of letters, ones I wrote but never sent, to Daniel, to Valerie, to myself. Some of them were angry, others just begged the universe to notice me. Beneath them, I found a small leather-bound journal, my mother's, no title, just brief entries dated in shaky cursive. "He didn't come home again, I didn't ask." Lynn spilled milk, he yelled, I said nothing. Sometimes I dream of walking into the ocean. I sat there on the attic floor, knees aching, heart splintering, holding the ghost of the woman I never really knew. She had inherited silence and passed it to me, but it ends with me. I burned the letters, not out of shame, but release. The flames curled around the paper like a closing chapter. Then I opened a fresh notebook and wrote something new. We do talk about things in this family, especially the hard things. We don't just survive them, we name them, and we heal. Tessa hasn't seen that page yet, but she will. I hadn't seen Valerie in 15 years, but I still knew the shape of her voice when she answered the door. She looked older, of course. We both did. Her hair had thinned into a silver halo, and her eyes had the guarded glint of someone who'd spent too long trying to be heard by people who had already decided she was hysterical. She didn't hug me. She stepped aside, let me in, and said, "You finally ready to listen?" Yes. She poured tea without asking how I liked it. We sat at a small kitchen table with a bowl of oranges between us, neither of us touching them. The silence was thick but not cruel, more like old dust, undisturbed for too long. "I always wondered what it would take to get you here," she said. I looked down. A man, again. She chuckled, bitter and short. They always get the credit. I studied her face, searched for remnants of the sister I once knew, the one who wore combat boots to church, who called out our father for skipping dinner, who once shouted down Robert in our backyard for raising his voice at me. She saw through him from the start. And I didn't believe her. You told me, I said finally. I didn't want to hear it. I know. We sat in the quiet that follows truth. It hurt, but it settled differently than shame. There was space in it. I wasn't crazy, Lynn, she said, not accusatory, just tired. I was furious, and no one wanted a furious woman. Why didn't you ever reach out? I did, she said. You didn't answer. I nodded, ashamed. She took a long breath. He had me committed. I blinked. After the gala, after I told him I was going to the police about his partner, Cameron's father, he had me committed, said I was having an episode. I was angry, emotional, easy to discredit. I swallowed hard. I didn't know. You didn't want to. She opened a drawer and pulled out a file folder, worn, creased, edges frayed. Inside, names, dates, newspaper clippings, a grainy photograph of a woman with a broken wrist. Her name was Lisa, one of the women. She filed a complaint against Cameron's father, Douglas. The case vanished. I met her at a support meeting years later. She didn't know I had ties to him. She flipped to another page. This one's about the settlement. Quiet, discreet, legal hush money. I stared at the paperwork, at the quiet proof of what I had suspected, what Tessa was walking into. What happened to Lisa? She moved, changed her name. She's alive, but she said no one believed her, especially not after the lawyers got involved. Valerie looked at me then. History doesn't always repeat, Lynn. Sometimes it mutates. We both sat with that. Then she reached into a different drawer, pulled out a small cassette tape, worn but intact. I recorded him, Robert, our last conversation before he cut me off, before I was unwell. You want to hear it? I nodded. She popped it into an old player, pressed play. Robert's voice crackled through the speaker, low and venomous. You don't get to ruin this for me, Valerie. That man built everything with me. And what about the women he hurt? Silence. You knew, she said. He exhaled, then, they were weak. They saw what they wanted, and if they didn't, they should have spoken up sooner. Click. That was it. But it was enough. I sat frozen, my hands clenched. Valerie leaned back. I've been waiting for someone to say it wasn't my imagination. It wasn't, I said. And I'm sorry for not seeing you, for not standing with you. She nodded, her eyes shining. I didn't need you to believe everything, she whispered. Just believe me. I do. We cried quietly, no theatrics, just the slow, aching release of two women who had finally stopped being quiet. When I left, she handed me the tape, said, use it if you have to. But more than anything, protect her. You don't get many chances to break the cycle. As I walked back to the car, the air felt lighter, not safe, but clearer. I had come for answers. I left with resolve. I waited until she was alone. Tessa had agreed to meet me at the old cafe near the park, the one where we used to split milkshakes when she was little. It was quieter now, emptier. The waitress remembered me, not her. That hurt more than I expected. She slid into the booth across from me, sunglasses on, coat still buttoned despite the spring air. You said it was important, she said flatly. I nodded. It is. The waitress poured coffee. Neither of us touched it. I studied her face. Her eyes were tired, too tired for someone her age. Her hands trembled slightly when she reached for the sugar, but didn't pour any. I need you to listen, Tess. Just listen, and when I'm done you can say anything or nothing, but I'm going to say what I should have said a long time ago. She stiffened but nodded. You're not broken, I said softly, but you're bending too far. Her eyes darted away. I know it feels safer to pretend everything is okay. I know what it means to live in a house where one wrong word changes the air, where love feels like a performance. You're always one misstep from failing. She shook her head. You don't know, Cameron. I know the kind of man who makes you afraid of your own voice. Her jaw clenched. He grabbed your wrist, Tessa. I saw it. I saw the way you flinched, the way you look at him before speaking. I used to be you. Tears pooled but didn't fall. I'm fine, she said. You're overreacting. You've always been too sensitive. The word stung. I let it. Tell me I'm wrong, I said quietly. Tell me he doesn't monitor your bank accounts. Tell me he hasn't asked you to stop seeing your friends. That he doesn't rewrite stories in front of you and make you question your memory. Her silence was loud. Then, like a dam giving way, her voice cracked. I don't know when it started, she whispered. At first it was sweet. He just wanted to protect me. Then it was money. Then it was my phone. Then one day I looked up and realized I didn't recognize myself anymore. She pressed her napkin into her lap like she could iron herself into stillness. He makes jokes, she said, about my weight, my voice, about how I'm just a pretty accessory. He calls it humor, but it doesn't feel funny, not anymore. I reached across the table. She didn't pull away. Why haven't you left? Her answer was a whisper barely audible over the hum of the cafe. Because he's better than being alone. My heart cracked. No, sweetheart, I said. He's just louder than your loneliness. We sat there in silence, her hand in mine, her shoulders shaking. I don't know how to leave, she said. Then let me help. I slid a small folder across the table. Documents, numbers, names of advocates, a list of steps. Valerie helped me build it. Tessa opened it with trembling hands. He'll notice, she said. Then we'll move quietly. We sat for another hour mapping exit strategies. A spare key to my place, a new bank account, a burner phone, contingencies, passwords, places to run. She breathed easier by the end of it, and just when I thought we were done, she said, There's something else. I waited. Meredith, his mother, she knows. I stared. She helped cover it up, Tessa said. All of it, the settlements, the rumors. She told me once that a woman must be strong enough to stay. She didn't mean strong. She meant silent. Twist, deeper than I expected. She said you'd try to poison me against him, said you were bitter and fragile. I laughed once. Bitter, maybe. Fragile, never again. She doesn't get to define you, I said, and she doesn't get to decide what we do next. Tessa looked up, her eyes clearer now, sharper. Then let's do it. And just like that, a line was drawn, not in rage, not in fire, but in quiet resolve. A mother, a daughter, and no more silence. The day we chose wasn't random. It was one of their garden parties. The kind Cameron's family hosted to reinforce their place in the world. Catered hors d'oeuvres, champagne pyramids, violinists near the pool. People dressed for photos, not weather. Everyone wore politeness like a well-ironed blazer. We arrived just after noon. Tessa beside me, chin lifted, spine straight. No sunglasses this time, no coat to hide in, just her. Cameron's mother spotted us first. Lynn, Meredith said, her smile thin as tissue. We weren't expecting you. Sometimes truth doesn't RSVP, I replied. Her smile faded slightly. Cameron approached then, flawless as ever. Blue blazer, gold watch, hand outstretched like he could charm the memory out of a room. Tessa, he said, you didn't mention guests. I'm not a guest, I said. I'm her mother. That flicker in his eye, the microsecond shift from control to calculation, told me he already sensed something was wrong. You're making a scene, he whispered to Tessa, low and tight. Not yet, she replied and stepped forward. I have something to say, she announced to the gathering guests. Conversation stilled. The string quartet quieted into awkward silence. Meredith's lips thinned. Warren, Cameron's father, straightened like a man sensing a PR crisis. Tessa's voice didn't waver. I used to believe being quiet made me safe, that obedience was love, but it wasn't. It was fear. Cameron moved to speak, but she cut him off. I stayed silent when you monitored my bank account, when you read my emails, when you called me names, accessory, obligation, pretty placeholder. I stayed silent when you grabbed my wrist, when you told me no one would believe me. She turned to Meredith. You said I needed to be strong enough to stay, but you meant I should be willing to disappear. The crowd murmured. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Then I stepped beside her, taped recorder in hand. Valerie's tape, rewound and cued. I pressed play. Robert's voice crackled from the speakers. They were weak. They saw what they wanted, and if they didn't, they should have spoken up sooner. That man built everything with me. You don't get to ruin this. Gasps. A dropped wine glass. Meredith's hand flew to her mouth. Cameron lunged for the recorder. You edited that, he snapped. This is manipulative. This is slander. You mean like reading her emails? I replied, stepping back calmly. You're paranoid, he spat. You've always hated me. You've been feeding her lies, twisting her against me. No, Tessa said, loud, clear. She gave me the truth, and I chose it. He froze, everyone watching. You don't get to rewrite my mother, she continued, or me. Something cracked in Cameron's facade. You're hysterical, he hissed. Just like her, just like Valerie. Crazy women always run in packs. And there it was, the real him, unfiltered, ugly. Silence rippled across the crowd like a second skin. Tessa didn't flinch. I didn't blink. You should go, Warren said finally, voice clipped. To jail? I asked, just loud enough. Meredith looked away. You don't have proof, Cameron growled. We have names, letters, bank records, settlement documents, I said, calm, poised. And a lawyer who believes us. His hands curled into fists. We're done, Tessa said, with you, with all of this. She turned. I followed. No drama, just decision. The last thing I heard was a quiet call from someone behind us. Did anyone else record that? We didn't wait to find out. In the car, Tessa stared out the window, breathing deeply. How did I stay so long? She whispered. Because no one told you could leave, I said, until now. When she arrived at my door, she didn't knock. Just stood there, suitcase in one hand, the other holding her phone like it was a weapon she was finally ready to lay down. I opened the door, stepped aside, and said nothing. Some moments don't need words, they need presence. Tessa moved into the spare bedroom the same night. We didn't make it cozy, not yet. She needed the space to be empty for a while, a room where no one dictated what hung on the walls or what she should wear to breakfast. The first morning she woke before me. I found her at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, eyes rimmed with sleepless red. I thought I'd feel free, she said. I don't. That comes later, I told her. First you feel everything else. We started small. I took her to file the protective order. It felt clinical at first. Boxes checked, statements typed in sterile fonts, but when she signed her name at the bottom, her hand didn't shake. I thought I'd cry, she said. You did, I replied. Just not now. Cameron's lawyer called 3 days later, cold voice, no apology, just a request for discretion. We gave none. The legal fallout began fast, faster than I expected. Valerie's tape, the photographs, the paper trail, everything we'd gathered was enough to open inquiries. The police didn't promise charges, but they didn't dismiss us either, and that was something. Meredith issued a public statement within a week. Crafted, sanitized. Our son is navigating a difficult misunderstanding. The word misunderstanding nearly sent me into flames, but I stayed steady. So did Tessa. She helped me repaint the kitchen. It started with a single wall, covered in faded floral wallpaper that had peeled long ago. We chose sage green, something new, something that didn't try too hard to please. As the color spread, so did the quiet between us, not tense, just full. Some afternoons she'd sit by the window with a notebook, not writing, just holding it. Other days she cried mid-sentence. We let it happen. We let it pass. I found an old photo of us. She was 3, wrapped in a towel like a burrito, hair dripping down her back, eyes too big for her tiny face. I remembered holding her that night. She had a fever. I stayed up humming lullabies, rocking her gently, whispering promises she couldn't understand yet. I won't let the world hurt her, I'd said aloud back then. I didn't keep that promise. Not the first time, but I'm keeping it now. The house changed with us. Clutter was cleared, curtains opened, the mirror in the hallway uncovered, for good. Tessa started cooking again. Nothing fancy, scrambled eggs, soup. She offered me a spoonful one night and said, "It's not much." "It's everything," I replied. Then the twist I didn't expect. A letter, not formal, handwritten, unsteady script. "Dear Tessa, you don't know me, but I saw the article, the statement. I recognize the name. He did it to me too, but no one believed me. I left, changed my name, hid for a long time. You saved me too. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Mira Tessa clutched the letter like it was both wound and balm. "He did this before me," she whispered. "Yes." "And she survived." "Yes." "And so will I." Healing didn't arrive like thunder. It came in teaspoons, slow, deliberate, often invisible at first. Tessa started therapy a week after moving in. She didn't tell me how the first session went. Just came home, walked straight to the porch, and sat in silence. I brought her a cup of tea. She didn't speak, but she didn't push me away either. That became our ritual, late-night tea on the porch. Some nights we talked, some nights we just listened to the wind. On the best nights, we laughed. Soft, startled laughter, like we were remembering it together. She started asking questions about me, about the years she'd been too hurt to ask. "Why did you stay with Dad so long?" she asked one night, her voice small. "Because I thought survival was the same as love," I answered. "And why did you forgive me?" "Because I never stopped loving you." That was the night she cried in my arms for the first time since she was a child. Not because she was broken, but because she was healing, and healing makes room for grief. I began volunteering at the Domestic Violence Center downtown, just 2 afternoons a week. I folded blankets, I brewed coffee, I sat with women who were still stitching their stories together. Sometimes I shared pieces of mine, never the whole quilt, just enough to let them know they weren't the first to be silenced, and they wouldn't be the last to find their voice again. Tessa noticed the shift in me, the way my spine stood straighter, the way my laughter landed deeper. She began to mirror it, slowly, shyly. Then, one afternoon, she asked me to come to a small dinner with her new group of friends from therapy. "We do potluck nights," she said. "Everyone brings something small." I made lemon bars. We sat in a circle in a warm living room full of plants and throw pillows and mismatched mugs. Tessa introduced me to each person by name. When she got to me, she smiled. Easy, natural. "This is my mom," she said. Just like that. Mom, not Lynn, not my mother, just Mom. It caught me off guard, not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. She said it like it had always been true, like it had simply returned after a long absence. That night, after everyone left, we framed a photo someone had taken of us on the couch. We're not posed, not even looking at the camera. She's laughing at something I said. I'm looking at her with that kind of unguarded joy only mothers understand. We hung it in the hallway, right across from the old mirror I once kept covered. Now they face each other, reflection and proof. Later, I sat at my desk with a journal Valerie had gifted me, brown leather, pages thick as promise. I wrote slowly, carefully, without apology. I was never embarrassing. I was just a mirror she was scared to see herself in. Now we're both here, both visible, and neither of us is alone anymore. That entry ended with a date, not because it was the end of the story, but because it was finally ours. The next morning, she passed me in the kitchen, brushing hair from her face, reaching for coffee. She looked at me, really looked, and smiled. This time, there was no hesitation, no distance, just pride, not pity. Some stories aren't just read, they're recognized. If you've ever been silenced, sidelined, or told you were too much, you'll find something here that echoes. Keep turning pages with us, where every quiet truth becomes a reckoning, and every broken bond a blueprint for healing. Let the next story we tell feel like yours.